Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on green financing for sustainable agriculture. This is our second webinar in the Footprint Sustainability Webinar Series, and today we have a very exciting lineup on a topic that is so well needed, on sustainability and green financing. I'm Natasha Bejnath-Pillay, the Resource Management and Sustainability Manager at Hortgro. Hortgro is an industry organization in South Africa that represents and supports fruit farmers, particularly the home and stone sector. We focus on supporting our members through research, market development, economic transformation, and sustainable agricultural practices. I'm your host and moderator for today, and yet again, as I said, we have a very exciting lineup, and our experts have a wealth of knowledge in the topic of green financing and green technology. Today, we will be learning more about the processes and the opportunities and how to access these opportunities on green financing. Please feel free to post any comments or questions that you may have onto the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the session today. Allow me to introduce my wonderful panel members to you. On my extreme left is Mr. Stephen Ngubane, and a special welcome to him. He is currently the Senior Specialist in the Agro-Processing and Agricultural Business Unit at the Industrial Development Corporation, or the IDC. He has been involved in the agri-space for over 24 years, and at IDC, he has supported many agricultural businesses to access over 10 billion rands worth of funding across the agricultural sector. He also serves on several national and international structures, including boards, councils, and committees, and we are very honored to have you here, Stephen. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
Ms. Tibusisiwe Mateko is a senior analyst in the Sustainable Agriculture Program at Green Cape. She has developed specialist skills in project management, stakeholder management, and business development, and we'll hear more about her offerings. Just last year, and we are very proud to announce this, just last year, she won the Mail and Guardian Greening the Future Award in Sustainable Agriculture. So we are very honored to have Tibusisiwe on our panel. Yeah, we get excited. Ms. Anel Bleknot is a sustainability expert and partner at Blue North Sustainability. She has over 20 years of experience in environmental science, and she brings a wealth of knowledge to the table, specializing in climate change, restoration ecology, sustainable agriculture, resource management, carbon emissions management, and waste reduction. Anel's dedication has guided well over 100 farms towards improved environmental practices in South Africa. We are very proud to have her here as well.
Natasha.
Welcome. Tibusisiwe, the Sustainable Agriculture programs at Green Cape, they're aimed at supporting our farmers and matching their needs with financial assistance. With some of the support that Green Cape provides, please share some of the examples of green technology and how they can be covered under green financing, and what are the benefits of these initiatives.
Thank you so much, Natasha, and good afternoon to our viewers in the webinar. So at a high level, Green Cape is a nonprofit organization with a mandate of increasing investment and job creation for the green economy. So we work in quite an amorphous way. We engage quite extensively with a number of different players within the sustainable agriculture ecosystem, starting with producers, of course, but then also with technology suppliers, with government, with research institutions, and other nonprofit organizations to try and understand the barriers for the greater adoption of green technologies and encourage and trying to address those through knowledge dissemination. And when we're looking at sustainable agriculture, sometimes players can be quite myopic in how it is viewed, in that it can only be something that is environmentally friendly. But at Green Cape, how we view green technologies is through three different lenses. The first, of course, being around environmental friendliness, but then the second being around economic viability. So any sort of investment you make in green technology should be viable to your business and have a net positive on your bottom line. And then the third, of course, is then its socio-economic impact that technology should have a net benefit for the workers and managers on your farm, as well as the community that surrounds your farm. So the technologies that we've been seeing, green technologies that we've been seeing, which have become increasingly popular, is your shade netting and tunnel systems. In the Western Cape alone, we saw 329% increase in area under production. Under shade netting and tunnels. We also have been seeing the greater proliferation of drip irrigation, of satellite imagery, and particularly of renewable energy alternatives, more specifically solar PV systems. And that has been because they have quite a significant benefit for farmers in terms of cost reduction through improved resource management, as well as increased revenue through either increased quality or quantity of yields.
Yeah, fantastic. So what are the drivers for green technology? Why should we be adopting them in our industry?
So as I alluded to previously, one of the key driver is around cost, but there's several themes within that. Yeah. So the first one being climate change. We are seeing greater weather volatility, temperature highs and lows, as well as then water scarcity. And so producers are making the investment in these green technologies to become more resilient to those shocks. We also have been seeing supply chain disruptions having an impact on your fertilizer prices, the costs of containers, and so making the investment in these green technologies means that you're able to improve the usage of your resources, and you're not seeing the mismanagement of resources on farms and addressing inefficiencies. And then the third theme that we've been seeing is around maintaining market share. So we've been seeing quite a lot of legislation changes and changes in regulations, particularly within the EU. They just recently issued directives which require retailers based in the EU to report on their emissions, as well as the emissions of their players within their supply chain. And so that then requires South African producers to start measuring and reporting on their emissions, as well as then addressing where they can cut their carbon emissions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So I know we've heard from Sibu around the drivers, and as the world is moving towards reducing emissions, green financing has been coming up to assist us. So for our farmers along the farm stone value chain, where can some of these emission reductions be made?
Thanks, Natasha. I think the agricultural value chain as a whole provides numerous opportunities for reducing your emissions and improving your efficiencies. And green financing supports that transition to a low carbon supply chain. That's the goal that we want to reach. So if you just look at the supply chain and just break it up into three areas, which the first is production, so that would be on farm, the packing facilities and cold stores, and then transports and logistics in those areas. So on the farm, precision agriculture can have a huge impact. There's a whole suite of technologies out there that one could use to improve your inputs, to improve your water usage, inputs like fertilizers and pesticides, which we also know has a big financial cost to your business, as Sibu said. Then regenerative agriculture is very, very useful. You can adopt techniques like cover cropping, crop rotation, reduce tillage, but very importantly to look at how you use all of that to build your soil health and ensure that carbon is sequestered into your soils. Renewable energy always plays an important role, I think, in particular solar energy on our farms and also our packhouses. And then efficient irrigation. So things like drip irrigation, sensor-based technology, satellite-based imagery, all to do with how do you just understand your crop water requirement and just provide enough water. And then integrated pest management is just to ensure that you reduce your reliance on chemical pesticides, both in terms of a carbon footprinting perspective, but also a more holistic environmental footprint perspective. On the pack house side, once again, like I said, energy efficiency, so efficiency measures in your processes, and then consider renewable energy. Interesting changes and new research within sustainable packaging. Lovely things out there, and I think it would be interesting to watch where that goes. And very important, right through the supply chain, is waste reduction, and especially food waste. We have those embodied emissions already in our food. We want to make sure and do everything in our ability to not let it go to waste. But then when it needs to be disposed, to also consider how do we dispose of it to not result in methane emissions. And I think perhaps the last thing is just the rise of electric vehicles, use of biofuels in vehicles. You see it more and more in delivery trucks. So important change and opportunity for carbon emission reductions. And then finally, on the transportation, it's just route optimization and lots of software that you can make use of to ensure that.
And how can producers reduce the emissions as we want to transition towards green technology along the value chain? How do we encourage producers to reduce emissions?
I think knowledge is important. So you need to be able to measure and assess your carbon footprint. Or if you want to look broader, your whole environmental footprint, and you need to understand where's your hotspots. So the word hotspots that we use is those areas that contribute most to your overall emissions. Once you know that, you can start looking at efficiencies in those areas, but you're also in a much more informed position to know which green technologies might make the biggest impact in your business and those that you might want to access green funding.
Yeah. Thank you, Anil. Stephen, you've been with the IDC for over 12 years, and we've heard about the wonderful investment offerings and the purposeful work you've been doing with the IDC. Tell us a little bit more about the IDC and the IDC's approach to helping our farmers to access green financing.
Thank you, Natasha, and good afternoon to the listeners. The IDC is a developmental funding institution owned by the South African government. We report to the national government through the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. We are driven by a number of, I think, responsible investment themes, which I think have been evidenced through the representation for both Busi and Anel. And those are sustainability. It's important when we look at an investment that its impact into the environment is managed appropriately. And I think there are frameworks to measure that impact. And so look into such issues. The second key area is viability, and I think Busi touched on it. The reason why the opinions and business people do is so that you can make a bit of money in the process. These may manifest itself in several areas, and I think it's common cause that I'll probably repeat some of what my two colleagues have looked at. The first one would be the precision technologies, and these would include improved genetic material that are becoming more and more available into the market, which are looking at addressing a lot of factors. And I think we'll see touch on the quality of the product, but also the volume, or rather the productivity that these comes into play. But also embedded in these genetic makeups is the resilience of these material to be able to withstand drought conditions, among others, that our environment in the context of South Africa, or should I say Saharan Africa, present. The second area, which also has come very strongly, would be the renewable energy, which is becoming more and more popular, and we would encourage our clients to adopt these technologies. And these may be, your solar systems, your hydro, your biofuels in the main, among other systems. The third and maybe area that I could highlight is the environmental friendly input, and I think Anel touched on it to say there are materials that farmers can adopt, which reduces their carbon footprint, and these would include in the main organic materials, be it fertilizers or otherwise, bioagents in the case of your protection of your crops, be it pesticides or herbicides, as well as eco packaging material at the value additions, where packages, processors are adopting recycling material among others. So from IDC point of view, when we take through an application into our process, the process spans itself into various stages, and I don't want to bore the listeners very much, but I'll try and summarize it in a very quick synopsis. So the first stage would be the initial screening exercise, where you come to the IDC and you've already assessed your transaction. And I think the two ladies provided us with a very clear framework of where the pressure points in the business, what you need to provide, because we will be looking at that to then measure whether you understand your business to start with, and whether you are clear of the direction you want to take, and that provides us a very good framework. So the initial screening is very important in that regard, where it's a semi-desktop, and remaining optimistic. If it's positive, you move to the next stage. And the next stage will be the due diligence, which is a detailed on-site assessment where we send a team, a multidisciplinary team, to then do a deep dive into assessment of these various factors into the business. Again, remain optimistic that the transaction progress in the system. The third stage would then be the team being the ambassador to take the deal and represent it to the appropriate committee. Depending on the quantum, we've got various committees, and very, very quickly, we've got 2 committees sitting in every week. What day is it today? Wednesday. There were 2 committees yesterday, adjudicating anything between 5 million to 250 million rand. So every week there's committee to that. And then the third one is board investment. Anything above 250 to the risk investment appetite that we may have on the transactions that would have to be presented to board investment. So the team will be the ambassador for the transaction. And then the last 2 stage will be the contracting, if it's approved by committee, where basically it's a negotiation of the commercial and the legalities surrounding the deal. And then the last day being the disbursement, which would entail an agribusiness certifying certain conditions as may be approved in the framework of the deal, and then obviously the disbursement. Maybe lastly, Natasha, not to make this very long, we've got a suite of products that agribusinesses could access into the IDC. But the best way to explain or represent this to the audience and the market would be in this framework. So on the left extreme, we would have what we call debt instrument. In the commercial space, we call them term loans. In the banking environment, capital, venture capital enterprises. In that basket, if you like, there's a suite of products because no one had fit all. And I think one of my colleagues alluded to that. We will look at, assess the transaction, and based on the cash flow of the business, try and then select the appropriate product in the credit space to then mirror the requirements of the enterprise. On the right extreme, we then have equity instruments. And we're talking probably to the market and the business people. They understand in a business, you also invest your own cash. Otherwise, it will be difficult to market that to anybody who then need to take a view to invest. So we also have equity instrument where we take a view in participating in a transaction where it's necessary as a shareholder and invest equity just like any other shareholder, and obviously look at the business to perform in future and dividends as a fair share with the rest of the other parties. Then lastly, something in between, the so-called your quasi or your preferred instruments, which is a debt instrument, but has characteristics of an equity instrument. And that is often utilized to boost the gearing of the structure in a business. Our sweet spot there being a 40 equity, 60% debt. And if we look at the credit instrument vis-a-vis the shareholder contribution, and it's not mirroring that sweet spot, we would then tap into this quasi instrument to then address the anomaly in terms of this ratio. But I must say, Natasha, and the market, sometimes an equity instrument or preferred instrument can be very punitive in its nature, because it's a credit, but it has an equity investment attributes, and so it needs to perform from a credit point of view in terms of the cost of funding, but it also has to filter through an equity instrument and the additional cost associated with that. So as much as it's available, it's not something that we often tap into, particularly in the agricultural space. We do maybe have, just at the tail end of my representation of our offerings, also have special schemes. And these special schemes, we utilize them to encourage certain behaviors or demographics in the market. One, the sustainability, which is the discussion of today. So when we assess a transaction, then we can satisfy ourselves that it's clear that there is a deliberate plan for an enterprise to manage their carbon footprint, among other attributes, that plays to their advantage. And the special schemes that an enterprise is able to tap into some of the special schemes. The other two factors which are very important, I think, in the context of our country and where we're coming from, is the principle of inclusivity as well as transformation. And particularly in that we look at encouraging the participation of women of all color, youth, as well as people with disabilities. And I would encourage any aspirant applicant in that regard to get in touch with us. These special schemes, and I think I can brag about it a little bit in that the cost of funding is unmatched. So if there are agribusinesses out there who are looking at funding their operations, be it capital investment or working capital, they can get in touch with us. And then lastly, we've also got non-financial support as part of our offerings. And this would spend themselves in a variety of ways, but I'll, in terms of time, just mention three of them. One is business support. As we assess the business, there will be key risks that we are identifying alongside mitigation. But how do we support an agribusiness to make sure they navigate through the process and they're not just thrown into the deep end and expected to swim? So we would then look at business support to assist in that regard. The second area would be the structuring, which often is underplayed. When we do an assessment, what we're basically doing is we're providing a second party detailed assessment on behalf of the business. And that's almost a free service, if you like, to the entrepreneur, where, and I kid you not, because we work with commercial institutions a lot. When we've taken an application through our investment appraisal process, and we've given you an onboarding letter, it's approved, you can go to a commercial bank, regardless of the quantum, and you can raise money in a split of a second at the strength of that, because commercial institution knows our investment appraisal process in that regard. So the structuring that we do at the back of the due diligence is very critical. And then lastly, the risk and mitigation that we identify and we become a solution together with an agribusiness. that would be my fair share of.
Thank you. That is so wonderfully comprehensive and detailed, and I love it. And I really, really hope that our audience will be able to contact you to customize something for them or tap into all those opportunities that now you've shared with us. Thank you so much. So while I still have the platform with you, I'm really, really interested to find out if you can just tell us about any of the pilots or current projects that you have running in the Home and Stone sector in terms of green financing, green technology. If you could share that with us, it's a note of inspiration, I would say. Thank you.
But thank you, Natasha. It's very, I think, refreshing just of late, the kind of activities that we've are becoming and crossing paths with. While there are historic investments that we've made, particularly in the Ceres and the Wellington area of the Western Cape, I think in your question, Natasha, allow me to just focus on the latest activity that is active. We currently are looking at a sizable investment in the Langerbank and Ashton area, no name mentioned, but I'm sure the listeners will know who I'm referring to, which entails within the framework of its supply chain 300 or so of the growers in the Pome and Stone Fruit. This transaction, although it's at the moment looked at it from an agro-processing point of view, the medium-long-term interest in that framework is to look at instituting a aggregating model to provide funding to the growers, and that will cover both the capital investment as well as the working capital. If I may zoom into the two areas, from a capex or capital investment point of view, I think the whole suite of technologies that the ladies have spoken about would feed into that. The investment we're looking at, for example, is looking at installing a mega solar system as part of their energy mix, and also an agri enterprise from a farming point of view can install that as well. So that funding would also, assist in that regard, among other capex investment. From a working capital aspect point of view, that would address any operational or technical related funding that a grower may have, including your production cost and the likes. So that facility that we would look into instituting in the future may be located in that enterprise, but we are open to look at other value chain aggregators and provide an integrated solution for the growers. And I think from an access point of view, as opposed to maybe a grower, coming to us and having to jump a whole lot of loops, the mechanism of how it could be structured would also address the access point in terms of finance, because sometimes finance can be a challenge to access if you can't demonstrate the readiness that a financer is looking at anything. So we are open for business. We're open to aggregators to approach us. And I hope I'll have few that I'll take home as well.
Thank you so much for that. So, Sibosisi, can you tell us how does Green Cape support our farmers, especially Home and Stone, in terms of accessing green funding as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
So at Green Cape, as I mentioned previously, we work with a number of different players within the ecosystem. So that means particularly when we engage with technology providers, we're able to get the type of data that can be used to build a business case for these technologies, as well as identifying what is the best use cases for technologies. So not every technology is applicable for every farm and every commodity. And we try to demystify to some extent which farmers can tap into which technology type. And then we compile them into industry briefs, which are available on our website for free. One I'll just highlight is our industry brief called Green Technologies for Intensifying Food Production. Another way that we support farmers is around guiding them through making the choices when it comes to investing in technologies, particularly just beyond identifying what technology you're looking at, is then trying to identify what is the relevant installer that you can get into contact with, and then also what are the metrics that you should be assessing if you're wanting to make that investment. An example of this is just last year, we were providing support to farmers in the Western Cape in terms of energy resilience. And we produced a situational guideline that could take producers starting from conducting energy audits on farm, identifying inefficiencies in their production system, and then if they decide then to invest in any sort of renewable energy, identifying which renewable energy is most applicable for their production system, what are the costs involved when you're getting quotes, what should be on your quote, if you're looking at an installer, what should you be asking that installer to make sure they're not a fly-by-night operation, and then the continued maintenance of that system type. So we can also support farmers in that way as well. And then the third way that we assist farmers is because we also engage with financiers on the back end. We're also able to understand which financing instruments are best suited for which technology types. So we can also then point farmers in the right direction when it comes to which financier is best suited for what sort of application you have. And also then what documents or reports you need to include in your application to make it more attractive.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you. Fabulous. And so some of the support that Green Cape has been providing to farmers, can you give us any of the lessons that have been learned along this journey?
Yes, definitely. So I think what we see as the most important lesson is before making any investment to really start at identifying any inefficiencies. First, through measuring your carbon emissions and then identifying the hotspots, as Anal had mentioned previously. Because often when we see inefficiencies, we run towards making the investment. But they can quite often be addressed through addressing those efficiencies and investing, or not even investing, but just changing to some extent your production system to become more efficient. The second tip I would say is around understanding that making the investment in these technologies is not just the investment in the technology. There is an ecosystem that supports that investment in terms of, so you need to start looking at is there any requirements when it comes to upskilling workers on your farm in terms of using that new technology, also to look into what are the costs involved in the maintenance of that technology, as well as then the replacement rates, because that can differ from what you were using previously. And then the third and last tip I would say is don't be afraid to ask the installer for references to previous installations that they have made. The best way to understand whether or not the technology works for you is to see if it's worked for someone else.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And Stephen, from the IDC side, do you have similar lessons learned in terms of offering financing for green technology?
Thanks, Natasha. Certainly. I think what we've observed in the market is that generally, change is not necessarily easy, and then we can see that manifesting in a number of ways in our lives, in the space we work in all sorts of environment. But perhaps in line with what Busi has highlighted, I could touch just three key areas from a financial point of view that we've been looking at. So the first one is what we've observed in the market is that the market and trade instruments are becoming more vital and catalytic in facilitating transition toward sustainable agriculture. And particularly in terms of the agribusiness, probably online would know they supply into a variety of supply chain, including your woolies. the farming for the future is one. And I know Anil has been very much involved with that. The likes of Caesars, the likes of Global Cap, among others. And I think Busi also touched on the trade instruments, citing the EU requirements and the other markets too that I think our government has assisted to the agribusiness space to penetrate, including the Asian market and specifically India and China.
Yeah.
But embedded in those trade agreements, there is very much heightened requirements of suppliers to look at reducing their carbon footprint. So we're looking at this framework as not just framework to access market, but as very fundamental framework to assist the agribusinesses to structure their businesses appropriately. And maybe from a financial point of view, another role there is that post-investment, where we are not very much actively looking over your shoulder. We can rest assured that through these systems and framework, as an agribusiness, you will remain married to the good cause of addressing these for the longest haul. After all, palm and stone fruit is the long-term investment. The second area, Natasha, that I could highlight as a lesson is that sustainable production systems are becoming more and more cost affordable. If we, for example, analyze the cost of a solar renewable system over the past 5 years, for example, it's evidence that the cost started from a top bar and somewhere as the system gained implementation and popularity and adoption into various markets, it's becoming more and more cost effective. So a lot of these systems are no longer as expensive. They still are pretty costly, but I think in comparative terms, they are becoming more and more affordable. And we would encourage agribusiness to implement these. And as I said earlier on, we've got special schemes. And maybe if I can go back there just to illustrate the point. Renewable energy, we've got a specific product located in the sustainability space where we could invest to assist a grower, a processor to basically introduce a solar system in that regard. So the specific product in that regard. Maybe the last and third area where we've also seen changes or lessons from a funding community, including ourselves, is that we are becoming more and more sensible to sustainability and customizing the product to encourage the client in this environment. And these, I think, as the ladies have alluded, where we measuring clients' contribution to sustainability agenda and we rewarding, the good performance in that regard is what I think in the market in the long term we would be able to achieve that.
Wonderful. Thank you. I really, really hope that our audience can contact you. You've got such a lot of inspiring projects set up already, and I'm sure that took quite a process. So thank you so much for that. And over to Anel. Anel, you've been involved with the Farming for the Future under the World Standard, and you've been involved with a lot of carbon emission projects. One of it is the Confronting Climate Change Initiative, which is a project that has been started to support our wine and fruit industry in South Africa. So can you tell us something around the benefits of being part of the project and this initiative, anything about this initiative that will really help to put farmers in a better step so that they can access funding for green technology?
Absolutely. Thanks, Natasha. I think if we listen to Stephen and Sibu, you can see that there's very rigorous processes behind accessing funding. And part of that is really to understand your environmental impact, but also what role does that play in your business plan to access the funding, and also a very clear journey. Where do you start? How do you implement it? How do you keep on monitoring and setting goals and targets for yourself? Absolutely. So you can't actually approach them right if you haven't got a bit of that, or at least some of it. They'll support you. And I think measurement comes in here. So this is where digital data collection tools and reporting tools like Confronting Climate Change is really to your benefit, and that you should try and embrace that, because it tells you where you are on this journey. If we have to use confronting climate change as an example, like Natasha said, it was a partnership. It started off as a partnership with the industry. And what I hear from Sibu and from Stephen as well, I think these partnerships are very, very important, where you have access to very knowledgeable advice, because this space is continuously changing and can be overwhelming. So basically, confronting climate change assists you not only with getting you there in terms of data collection, high quality data and reporting, but you've got a team that has knowledgeable support that guides you through the process. So you get to a point where you have a report, but now what now? And I think it's then to say, what are your options? How do you reduce your emissions? How do you start setting goals for yourself? And how do you incorporate that thinking into your business? So we're not just aiming at reducing your emissions. We realize that this is a business, and I think, Stephen, you also said it earlier, we're working with businesses and they need to make a profit. So how can those two work together? And our experience is often that once businesses start looking, they start measuring, they start having a deep dive into their inputs, whether it's carbon emissions, whether it's water, whether it's biodiversity, they do see some cost savings, and they do see their efficiencies. So what makes business sense in the environment does make business sense. Increases your bottom line.
Absolutely, thank you. And we know, Anel, that carbon reduction is just one means of getting your step in closer towards accessing green financing. So what are the offerings that producers can gain from Blue Knot sustainability, and how can you help us in the pulp and stone sector apart from just carbon reduction?
Yeah, I think that's so important, Natasha. There is a lot of pressure in terms of carbon emissions reductions at the moment, but there is so much more, and there's sort of more holistic approach that you can follow. But if I stick to carbon emissions for a moment, I think it's important to realize it's a journey. So, and different people in different places. So we're not all yet at the point where we want to reduce our emissions. Some of us just need to learn the language that we've spoken. So you need that awareness, you need that training. But then you might get to a point where you want to improve on your data collection, where you want to start setting targets. And that's where we come in with either product carbon footprinting or entity or corporate carbon footprinting. Then we follow a science-based targets approach to help you set those targets and get measurable timelines and targets implemented. I think the other important subject that you spoke about or alluded to is we support businesses in the broader environmental, social, and economic assessments to be able to assess your business in these different areas and know where you're at. And then from there, you can understand what's really material to your business, because it's not the same for every business. I think, Stephen, you said you learned that along the way. Every business is not the same in agriculture. So start measuring, have those metrics in place in the areas that's material to you, and then that will allow you to have improved reporting and start setting targets. So yeah, I think we've learned lessons along the way. We've been doing this for a while, so you're welcome to just contact us. Look at our website, subscribe to our newsletter or LinkedIn page, and just start learning about what's out there, what's the trends, what are the topics that you need to know about.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I've learned so much. I see there are no comments or questions in the chat. Just from my side, I really, really would encourage you to contact our panelists. If you're not sure if you have any questions, actually, you may email to lindy@hortgro.co.za or follow us on our social media platforms or find us on the socials and on our websites. And you're welcome to leave a contact question for further indulgence. I just personally have learned so much, and I think our panelists know exactly what purposeful work they've been doing, and we really, really value your time. And I want to thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. Like I said, I would encourage the audience to get hold of you and see the offerings that you can bring to them and customize whatever opportunities we have. So we're here to share the information so that you can actually adopt these into your operations. Very big thank you from us. Remember to share this episode with your fellow farmers and other enthusiasts, agricultural enthusiasts. Everything is on our social platforms. This is recorded and will be sent to you or accessible on the World Wide Web. And our next webinar will be in February. We will be doing a sustainability-related topic. It may even be green financing, but with other financiers and commercial banks. So stay tuned to us to find out more about this. I see we have a question. Where can one get the contact info of the speakers? If you can email Lindy at hortgro.co.za, the email address that you've asked or requested a link from, if you email Lindy, she'll provide you with their contact details, even some websites if you want to understand a little bit more about the processes. Lindy is the contact that you can make, and we will facilitate the process here. Thank you so much as well. From me, Natasha Bechner-Pillay, and the rest of our Hortgro team and our technical support, thank you for joining us. Hope you will join our next webinars, and together let's journey into leaving a more sustainable legacy together. Thank you so much.